Yo, what's up everyone? My name is Zenitsu, and we are back with another Digimon video. So today, I'm going to be doing another episode in underrated but awesome decks to play in the Digimon TCG. So, before I get into the actual decks this episode, if you're enjoying this type of content and you want to see more, feel free to leave a like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you can stay up to date when I upload or go live next, and feel free to tell me your thoughts about any of the decks down in the comments below. But just as a quick disclaimer, I do want to point out on what underrated actually means, because some people might not exactly understand what the definition of underrated is. So underrated is to basically underestimate the extent, value, or importance of someone or something. So for Digimon decks, this could just literally mean older decks that aren't seeing play, or bad decks, in quotation mark, that might be able to do some surprising things, or even decks that haven't necessarily topped in a large event in a while, but can still do well at the locals level. So those are mainly the types of decks that I'm going to be referring to when I'm talking about these decks being underrated. So keep in mind, not all of these are probably going to be super competitive, and I don't necessarily recommend that you're taking them to large events, but they're still decks that can be fun and reasonable to play nonetheless. So without further ado, let's kick it over to some of the decks and see what we're going to be looking at today. Alright, so the very first deck that we're going to be taking a look at is going to be Lucemon. So Lucemon is a control deck, and he wants to basically do what all control decks do. Remove the opponent's problematic threats off of their field and have some good recovery and sustainability on your field, so that way it's going to be very hard for the opponent to actually win the game. That would be fine and dandy and all if the biggest weakness of the deck wasn't for the fact that you actually can't control how your cards are going to resolve. What I mean by this is, I'll just take a look at the level 5 Lucemon as an example. It has the ability to force the opponent to choose one of two options. Either option A, which is going to have them delete one of their Digimon or Tamers, or B, if you didn't delete anything because the opponent chose not to, then you get to trash the top card of their security and recover one, which is obviously the equivalent of dealing some damage and allowing you to win against the opponent a little bit easier, because they're not going to be able to ideally fight through how much security you could be letting them if they don't want to choose for their Digimon or Tamers to get deleted. So it really sounds like it's trying to put the opponent into a bad position, but in reality, when it comes to playing against Lucemon, letting them recover is actually the correct option, because they don't really have that great of ways of interacting with your Digimon or Tamers otherwise. And that's kind of like the big fault to Lucemon, is the fact that it does seem more like a knowledge or skill check deck rather than an actual true control deck. But that doesn't mean that he's not really fun to play, because he is fundamentally different than a lot of other decks in the game because of just how Lucemon is working. So you have your egg, which is recyclable, by the way, because it does have Lucemon in its text. That's going to allow you to gain a memory and draw a card for discarding a card, so it's helping with the overall tempo and consistency of the deck. Then we have a slew of different utility Lucemons that are all doing very different things when it comes to the added abilities that they have, but they all want to digivolve into a Lucemon Chaos mode. So you have your stereotypical searcher, you have your stereotypical extra utility card. In this case, it's going to be recovery, and then you also have a card that's going to help with the overall defensive play lines, because it actually has an inheritable of giving our higher stages blocker while having blocker himself and allowing us to be able to move him out of our racing area instantaneously, which is really, really good for the overall tempo of the deck. Then when it comes to the level 5s, they all kind of have this exact same ability. They're doing it maybe just a tiny bit differently in terms of if it's on play when digivolving, when attacking. It doesn't matter. They're still just trying to use this ability. And then they all have some kind of like protection type of ability as well. So I just find that the BT-18 one is the worst one, and the best one is going to be the EX6 one, because the EX6 one allows us to be able to play out our Satan mode or play out a level 6 7 Great Demon Lord from our trash. So that's really, really cool because that allows us to then play into some of the Demon Lords, and we do have 2 really good Demon Lords that we're going to be playing towards, which is going to be Leviamon and Beelzemon Ace, both being very strong disruptive tools for the opponents to try to fight through. Then, when it comes to just our other level 6 Digimon, we do have Lucemon X Antibody, because, you know, all the 7 Great Demon Lords have an X Antibody, and this is his X form. His X form is going to be coming with his X option, which is really good at just trying to force the opponent into even more bad positions, and try to accelerate and further your own game plan. Then when it comes to just kind of how the rest of the deck functions, it is basically just trying to get into Satan mode, either of the Satan modes, as the big win condition. So you're trying to control the opponent as best as you possibly can, or stall long enough until you get into one of the Satan modes, and then the Satan modes is supposed to control even more and put the opponent in even worse of a position, while we also do have lots of ways of being able to sustain ourselves thanks to all of the recovery abilities that we're most likely going to be forcing the opponent to choose for us. Then it's not like we're left without any options for trying to actually interact with the opponent's Digimon, because if they're always choosing removing their own security, which is the correct answer most of the time, it's not the correct answer all of the time, then that means that they're going to have a relatively sizable field that we could then take advantage of in a couple of different ways, like Medieval Gallantmon or Death Xmon, to actually control the field. And when it comes to just some of the other options, it's just kind of playing more Lucemons is what they're all kind of designed to do. So you have Dead or Alive, that's also playing your Lucemons, Janai's House, that has the security ability to play out your level 3 Lucemons. You also have Paradise Lost, which is arguably the best option in the entire deck, which allows you to also play out your Lucemons, but the main ability is allowing you to regress relatively quickly because it's giving your Digimon some nice buffs, and you could also, from the trash, use this ability to make an attack without suspending, which is incredibly powerful. Then you also do have the ability to run something like a Biting Crush for even more control, especially since we're already playing lots of Demon Lords and Leviamon. So that's pretty nice of a cute little tech card, as well as just having the ability to also try to interact with the opponent's options. It is a little bit on the slower side when it comes to that, but the fact that we actually have something that can remove options is incredibly powerful and definitely not to be underestimated when set up and used correctly. So that's kind of just what Lucemon is doing in a nutshell. I think it is a really interesting deck. It's just unfortunate that you don't have the ability to control how your effects are going to resolve, which has a huge impact on how the game is going to end up going, making it more of a skill and knowledge-based check deck rather than an actual true control deck. Alright, and this next deck that we're going to be taking a look at is one that I have personally played in the past, and I found it to be quite enjoyable, even if it isn't going to be the strongest deck ever. Its whole thing in terms of what it's trying to do is just be another DNA-based deck. So even though the deck hasn't gotten any new direct support cards, it did get a new indirect support card that does technically make the deck a little bit better. And the deck in question is going to be XL, and the DNA that we're trying to set up is just trying to abuse Chaosmon Volderarm as best as we can, because that's literally the whole goal of the deck, is just to DNA into our Chaosmons. You technically could run some of the other Chaosmons, it's just not as good as Chaosmon Volderarm because of how strong this card actually is. It was so strong that other decks also adopted using it because it's just that good. So he comes with security attack +1, so he can hit pretty hard, and partition, so he has his own built-in protection. Then he even comes with his own when digivolving ability to suspend the opponent's Digimon or Tamers down, gain an extra memory for doing so, and then none of their Digimon or Tamers can unsuspend or even activate on play effects, limiting what the opponent is even able to do. So that's all really, really powerful, but how are we actually going to be setting up our DNA is the big question. So the answer to that question is off of our level 6 Digimon, because our core level 6 Digimon, which is Bancho Leomon and Varodurumon, both have the play cost reduction by 5, so they're essentially 7 costs when we hard play them. So the idea is we're going to build one singular stack, hard play a Mega, and then enable our DNA. And they also have the end of turn DNA, so even if the memory passes over when we hard play our Mega, then we're still able to DNA and we're also still able to attack. So that's really good and powerful there. And we even have the egg to enable some extra Digivolutions. So even if we're not in a level 6 Digimon, we could go into a level 5, then hard play the level 6, Digivolve into the other level 6, and then DNA from there. So that's kind of how everything is going to be set up. And then we even have an extra level 6 Digimon in the form of an ace with some nice built-in protection if we have an extra body to sacrifice. So it's just another very good and powerful card. And all of our level 6s are also coming with their own inheritables to be able to make a Chaosmon Volderarm that much stronger. You have Darkdramon with a collision, you have Varadurumon with some minusing DP, and you have Bancholeomon on the defensive side with Pseudo Blocker in the form of a Redirector. Then when it comes to just some of the other abilities the deck is playing with, on the lower levels you have Barrier and you have Piercing, so that way your Chaosmon Volderarm is going to have a slew of extra abilities to make him even stronger. Then we also do have that on our level 4 Digimon, and when it comes to our level 5s, they're just extra utility cards between Loader-Leomon and Crowmon. Then the option lineup is pretty simple. We're going to be running the best new consistency tool for the deck, which is Chrome Memory Boost. So this is allowing us to grab green or black, which is pretty much every color of Digimon in the entire deck outside of Ukomon, on top of it being a memory boost, so we have instant memory later to make our plays a little bit more effective. And because everything in the deck is pretty much part yellow, we're going to also be able to use Yellow Scramble as another really good card to be able to make our Digivolutions a little bit cheaper and replay out our body if we don't have one on our field. And the key option of the deck is actually going to be Singularity of Chaos, allowing us to not only just make playing our high-level Digimon even more effective, but it's also going to allow us to kind of loop our Chaosmon, because the inheritable ability is going to kill our Chaosmon, which will then trigger our partition, so we could go into another Chaosmon to continue to try to floodgate the opponent out of the game. So that's kind of the whole core game plan there, and the Tamers are here just to kind of help support it. So we have the TK being another generic, easy-to-use Tamer that's going to help with the consistency and be the mem setter, and we have our Flex or Filler Tamer, which I'm electing to use as Analog Youth, allowing us to not only just to be even more consistent, but it's just a very functional deck that isn't doing anything hyper oppressive. And the last deck that I'm going to be taking a look at today is one I'm in by no means an expert at, but I do think that it is a pretty decent deck, even though it hasn't had any really big, large tournament results. And the deck in question is going to be Myotis Loop. So I know that the Myotis Loop, the core cards, is literally going to be Arukeni Mummymon the Tamer, because when it gets deleted, you get to play out a Myotismon level 5, which we have the new Myotismon that we're going to be playing, which could help do some extra things, especially in combination with Myotismon X Antibody. But the idea on how this is getting deleted is by playing out our Arukenimons and our Mummymons. So that's going to essentially allow us to spawn 2 Digimon off of playing 1 Digimon, which is exactly what Myotismon is going to be asking for when it comes to Malomyotismon. And we're going to be using Malomyotismon to interact with the Yukio to be able to give it Rush, so that way we could kind of just keep playing out our Tamers off of our Digimon being deleted, then delete our Digimon for more Digimon, and then just have Rush and just kind of swing constantly. So that's kind of like the bit of ebb and flow of what the deck is essentially trying to accomplish. Then we have lots of different ways to be able to increase the overall value of the deck, like utilizing the BT3 Malomyotismon for when any other Digimon gets deleted, whether it's ours or the opponent's, it doesn't matter. That allows us to gain some additional memory, not limited to once per turn, and because the primary way we're going to be digging through our deck is discarding and drawing cards, that's where Nidhoggmon is another really good card to to gain us some extra instant value. Then when it comes to the extra value of the deck, we're not really playing with a lot of rookies, so that means Ukomon plus Demi-Meramon is one of the best searching and digging tools at the same time. When it comes to Ukomon swinging, chipping at the opponent's security, then deleting himself, discarding cards, and drawing cards. And Devimon is just the deck's dedicated searcher, so you might as well just run it. Then when it comes to the options, we're just playing some of the better options that were limited to one, like Jack Raid Calling, and then we have Deathclaw to try to hose on some of the opponent's floodgates that might be locking us out of some plays, while also triggering some of our own on-delete abilities ourselves, as well as Digital Gate Open, allowing us to not only just be more consistent, but help set up our tamers from our hands, so that way we have more ability to play more of our tamers, which is what the deck really wants, because we do need to see Arukenimon, Mummymon, and the Arukeni Mummy Tamer to really get going. But that's all I really have this week. I hope you enjoyed this type of content, and wish to see you all in the next video. Later.